A few years ago, a group of friends planned a camping trip to Amber Forest, a place famous for its natural beauty. The four of us had camped several times in different national parks, but this was the first time we were going to a forest as large as Amber Forest. The trip was supposed to last about a week, including sightseeing and exploring the area. In the first few days of the trip, we had a solid plan, marking out camping spots and places we wanted to visit. But after those initial days, we decided to leave things to chance and follow any path that caught our interest. The beginning was great, as we saw many famous sights and enjoyed wonderful evenings around the campsite. As the trip neared its end, we started looking for a place to camp for the night. Our plan had given us the freedom to make decisions on the fly, but we were struggling to find a suitable spot. Darkness was setting in, and all the nearby sites we visited were already full, with no space left for us. While driving at night, we passed an open area with some pits surrounded by stones, which looked like a good place to camp. This spot wasn't on any online maps, but it seemed like people had camped there before. Since no one else was around, we decided to pitch our tent there for the night. We set up the tent in the dark using flashlights, as it was already very late. Unlike the other nights of our trip, we didn't feel like sitting around and exploring. We got into the tent and quickly fell asleep. I woke up in the middle of the night to the whispers of my friends, who had quietly woken me up, saying that something unusual was happening. I immediately understood what they were talking about because there were strange bird-like sounds coming from the forest surrounding our tent. Even though it was still the middle of the night and far from morning, the sounds were varied and seemed to be coming from every direction. Silently, we decided to leave the tent without turning on any lights to check out the situation. We stepped outside and sat near the car, which was parked beside the tent since we had used the car's lights to set up the tent. As we waited for our eyes to adjust to the darkness, the sounds grew closer and then suddenly stopped. At that point, we realized that the sounds weren't natural but were likely communications between people coming from different directions in the forest. I exchanged a silent look with my friends, and we decided that getting into the car was the smartest move. We quickly scrambled into the car, started the engine, and turned on the lights. What we saw at the edge of the forest was horrifying. We saw two figures, more like human-like creatures, running toward us. It was difficult to determine their gender due to how filthy and savage they looked. We drove away as fast as we could and saw three more people on the other side of the forest when the light shone in that direction. We drove through the night until we were out of Amber Forest, leaving our tent behind. Since all our essential belongings were with us in the car, we decided to cut the trip short and book a hotel for the last night. We didn't go camping together again for a long time after that terrifying night in Amber Forest. The four friends woke up the next morning in the hotel they had booked for the last night of their trip. The atmosphere in the hotel was completely different from the campsite, characterized by comfort and safety. Despite this, the unsettling memories of the previous night lingered in their minds. None of them talked much about the details of that incident, but they all avoided mentioning the dark forest and the people they had seen. They decided to spend their remaining day visiting some nearby tourist attractions to ease their minds. They headed to a popular park, trying to enjoy the scenery to pass the time and alleviate the impact of the terrifying experience. However, with every step they took, it seemed that the memories of that dark night were chasing them. Every time they glanced at the distant Amber Forest, they were reminded of those strange sounds and the frightening scene. Despite their attempts to enjoy the trip, the memories of that night were hard to forget. While wandering through one of the parks, they encountered a group of tourists who were discussing their trip to the Amber Forest. One of the friends inquired about their experience, and one of the tourists mentioned that they had faced a similar issue, hearing strange noises as well. The tourist said they didn't know what was happening but decided to leave before nightfall. Knowing that others had experienced something similar gave the friends a mixed feeling of both anxiety and relief, realizing they weren't alone in that frightening experience. In the evening, the friends returned to the hotel, still gripped by fear and anxiety. They decided to talk openly about their experience. Conversations began to include details that hadn't been mentioned before, as they revealed their feelings and thoughts that they had been afraid to share. They were trying to make sense of what had happened, but no clear answers emerged. Their anxiety grew over time, and they began to wonder if they should return to the Amber Forest in the future. Thoughts started to circulate about the nature of the people they had seen, why they appeared at that time, and the mysterious sounds they had heard. The Amber Forest seemed like an unsolvable mystery. Even so, they knew they had to face their fears, so they decided to take a short break at the hotel before leaving in the morning. As they sat in the hotel, some of them began writing notes and collecting their thoughts about the trip and the experience they had, hoping to find some explanation or answer to their troubles. That night was filled with reflections and memories, but the friends were determined to find meaning in what had happened and to move on with their lives despite the confusion they had experienced. The friends spent a quiet night at the hotel, regaining some of their composure after the terrifying experience the day before. However, they had no idea how to cope with those disturbing memories. They were all determined to understand what had happened, feeling that they couldn't move on without trying to explore the mystery they had encountered. After taking some time to regain their strength and think about what to do, they decided to return to the Amber Forest the next day, but this time with better preparation. They knew they had to be cautious and ensure their safety at all times. They headed to the forest equipped with maps, photos, and camping gear, ready for any emergency. Upon arrival, they avoided going back to the same spot where they had camped before. Instead, they chose a different location near one of the well-known tourist centers in the forest, hoping that the lights and security would be better. As sunset approached, they began setting up their camp at the new site. While they were working on setting up, they noticed that the forest was quieter than before. There were no strange sounds or suspicious movements, and they hoped this was a sign that things might be normal this time. As night fell, they were cautious but optimistic. They lit a fire and sat around it, talking about their previous experiences and memories. They felt like they were in a safer place, and the atmosphere seemed more comfortable. However, as midnight approached, the strange sounds they had heard before returned to their minds. They listened carefully, but this time, they didn't hear any unusual noises. Still, the tension lingered, and they decided to stay alert throughout the night. The next morning, they woke up to find that everything was calm, with no signs of trouble. They decided to carefully explore the surrounding area. During their walk, they found some evidence of old human activity in the area, such as remnants of old camps and discarded tools. However, there was no concrete evidence explaining what had happened that night. When they returned to the hotel to pack their belongings, they felt a sense of relief and safety. They were grateful they had managed to return to the forest and avoid any further encounters with those mysterious phenomena. However, they would never forget the experience of that night. As they prepared to head back home, they talked about how to cope with their feelings and deal with what had happened. Their trip to the Amber Forest had been an unforgettable experience, strengthening their friendship and proving their ability to face difficult situations. They became more aware of the mysterious nature of forests and their potential dangers. They decided to take lessons from their experience and be more cautious on future trips. Despite everything, the memory of that night remained a significant lesson in their lives, teaching them that adventure isn't always what it seems and that good preparation can make a big difference.